Radical Radio Collective.
Good afternoon, listeners. You are tuned into 4ZZZ on 102.1 FM, and this is Eco Radio, Australia's longest-running peace and environment radio show. Maybe. We don't have any proof on that, but we have given the awards ourselves. It looks exactly like that meme of Obama wrapping a medallion around his own neck. We're claiming it, and no one has refuted it so far, so that's a win in my book at least. We are taking over your middle of the day in the middle of your week airwaves, right at the start of the month. We're in beautiful spring at the moment, and just as you would have heard from that CSA, we're all getting those, or the public service announcement, I should say. We're getting all of those little bird hatchlings out there at the moment, so keep an eye on them, make sure they're safe. My name is Zack, and my pronouns are they, he, and I want to start off by acknowledging and paying my respects to the custodians of the country on which we broadcast. We are located in the city Magangin on Turrbal Yugara Ugrapul land. I also want to acknowledge and pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are listening in today. Our radio waves reach Kabi Kabi and Jinambara country in the north, Waka Waka country in the west. In the east, we pay our respects to the Quandamuka people, and down south we reach Commonberry, Nagaragwal, Munanjali, Wanjirabara, Yugambeh and Bunjalung countries. There is no Crown land. Thank you very much for no idea today. Excellent playlist selection as always, and congratulations on not making the mistake of saying orgasm instead of organism this week. On today's program of Eco Radio, though, I'm going to be having a chat with Gabby from Rising Tide, and later, if we get some time, last week I went out looking for some freshwater eels again, and I really do love freshwater eels, so maybe I will talk about that.
Are you a band, brand, or business who needs some help getting your story out there? Then check out local Brizzy copywriter Megan Wrights. Her name is Megan, and she writes stuff like websites, blogs, emails, press releases, social media, and more, while always keeping true to your voice. So if you need a hand with all things wordy, head to meganwrites.com.au. That's meganwrites.com.au. Megan Writes is a proud sponsor of 4ZZZ.
Line with me, I have Gabby from Rising Tide. How are you doing today, Gabby?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Zack.
So, I think the place to begin with is, could you give us a rundown on what Rising Tide is? I assume a lot of our listeners have heard of it already, but for people who don't know what it is.
So Rising Tide is basically the people's blockade of the world's largest coal port. It's happened about 9 times, and over the last 2 years, we've had up to 7,000 people come to Newcastle to blockade the port there. So it's about building a movement of ordinary people to register the importance of Australia as one of the largest fossil fuel exporters in the world, and to say we have to address this if we're going to do anything about climate change.
Yeah, so what motivated you to join Rising Tide then?
Well, I suppose it's about, this was a group that was doing something real, because it's difficult as an ordinary person to feel as though you can do anything about the large issue of climate change. But it's about coming together with like-minded people and say, we can actually do something here, we can have an impact and have a bit of fun on the way as well. And it's worked extremely well. So I've been down to Newcastle over the last 2 years, and it's been a fantastic event. It's very family-friendly. There's been lots of people there and lots of commitment to trying to impact government policy on the fact that we need to address, our reliance as a fossil fuel exporter.
Yeah, and I'm having a look at the event for this year as well. It all looks like quite a lot of fun, if I'm being honest, because there's like a festival there as well that has such people as Montaigne and Jem Casadei. So it's really turned into quite a large event for like a number of people as well. Yeah,
so it's very much about broadening the appeal. It's not just radical greenies and that kind of stuff. It's about really saying this is, it's a broad movement. You too can be involved. Come along, participate in whatever way you want. So there's usually at least 1,000 volunteers that pull the whole thing together. So it's very much a a people-led and people-constructed and people-driven movement. So it actually is it's a great experience, and I really encourage people, if they think they'd like to come along, to do so.
Yeah, so as you described, this is aimed at drawing attention to the fact that Australia is one of the largest coal exporters in the world. Do you think this protest is working to turn the tide on fossil fuel use?
So I think we're highlighting that the impact of Australia's exports around fossil fuels, and we're trying to build a really large movement. There's lots of good examples of large-scale protests having an impact on the policies of government and community, and and shifting our reliance. And I think there's plenty of evidence now, the uptake of electric vehicles, the uptake of people electrifying their homes, to shift away from coal particularly. And even the Port of Newcastle acknowledges that coal does not have a future in Newcastle itself because of that global shift. So I think that is happening. It does take a mass movement. But we also have to recognise the power of the fossil fuel industry and how they've captured government. You only need to look at the influence of Woodside in getting a climate trigger dropped from the review of the EPA laws in Western Australia and the review of Australia's environmental laws. So when the new Environment Minister, Murray Watt, when he improved the extension of Woodside's gas plant on the Burrup Peninsula for 40 years, there was no capacity in Australia's laws to consider the impact on climate of that project. So it's an example of the power of the fossil fuel industry and how they've captured government. So it's the broad people of Australia that have to push back against that kind of power.
Yeah, I think there's certainly, there's an excellent quote that I heard once, that we must all do what we think is insufficient to see the change in the world we desire, and that was added with no single snowflake thinks it's responsible for the avalanche, and that certainly seems like an appropriate analogy here. So the People's Blockade is happening again this year, and it has been promised to be the biggest one yet, the biggest and best one yet. Do you know what Rising Tide's goals are for this year?
Well, again, to keep building the size of the movement, we had about 7,000 people last year. I don't think there's a number they're aiming for this year as such, but to broaden the participation of people. Like, I remember there was 170 people arrested last year, and there was a broad range of people from some quite significant public figures. And so it's about saying this is really important, something that you can join in, you can participate in, and the aim is to stop those coal ships. In some ways it's symbolic because it's only done over a short period of time, but that symbolism is extremely important in saying to government, it has to be addressed, it cannot be ignored.
And so Newcastle is quite a fair distance away from southeast Queensland. For people who want to support Rising Tide and are based in Brisbane, but they are unable to join you down there for the People's Blockade, how can they go about supporting Rising Tide?
Well, fantastic opportunity to ask that. We're having a paddle party on this Saturday, so it's a little bit of a taster at what happens at the Blockade. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do some on-water training for people in kayaks, and then we're going to paddle from the South Brisbane Sailing Club up to the West End boat ramp, accompanied by a solar-powered DJ boat. Then we're going to have a dance party there, and then paddle back. So that's one example of, you can get an idea of exactly what happens at the Blockade, or you can simply join the Rising Tide Magunjan hub. Mm-hmm. So we have a number of events. There's a general training coming up on the ethos of Rising Tide, how it works, and then I think we've got another event coming up following that. So there's a number of events that we're doing in Brisbane to support the whole movement, so you can join into any of those. We meet fairly regularly, and we try and make sure that it's something that people feel as though they can participate in.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic time. I think any time you get a DJ on a boat, that's certainly an excellent time, and there's no better way to spend part of your weekend than doing a nice little stroll up the a nice paddle up the Brisbane River. That would be lovely.
Yeah, so if you're not able to join in a boat, you can. In fact, we will have people walking the route as well. So It's about engaging with people along Riverside Drive in West End, and just it's about as much as having fun as to get people used to being on the water and to, get an idea of what it's like at the Blockade. So certainly one of the fun things I've done at the Blockade in the last 2 years is the overnight Blockade, and that's actually been fantastic. It's very quiet out on the water during overnight, and we've sung sea shanties and all sorts of strange things. So it's definitely not your usual kind of protest. It's very much a really enjoyable space to be in, and around people who are very much like-minded. And there's a lot of training on process and how we make sure we achieve this through a non-violent means.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Gabby. And if any of the listeners want to go and join in that, I suppose the prelude to the to the People's Blockade happening later this year. This one, the Rising Tide Paddle Party, that is occurring on the Brisbane River, is occurring at 9 a.m. this Saturday, and that one will take place at the South Brisbane Sailing Club. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, Gabby.
Thank you very much, Zack.
Pure, fresh honey, straight from your own backyard. Imagine the joy of sharing the sweetness with friends and family, knowing you harvested it yourself. And with the award-winning Flow Hive, you can easily enjoy honey directly from the hive. With no heavy lifting and only minimal space required, start a new adventure this spring and discover the wonder of beekeeping with Flow Hive at honeyflow.com.au. Proud sponsor of 4ZZZ.
Your weekly dose of science on 4ZZZ is now available as a podcast.
I learned that you can hear the difference between different water temperatures when they're poured. I'm going to pour one after the other into a different glass, and you have to tell me which one is which temperature. I've got a hot and a cold. Right, here's the first one. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm saying cold.
It sounds cool, yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the second one. Well played.
Shut up. Search No Idea 4ZZZ on your favourite podcasting app. That's spelled K-N-O-W, like Kno Idea. It's a visual pun on an audio platform. I don't know why we did it.
This is 4ZZZ, and this is a community-run radio station. So we rely on subscriptions from the community to keep the lights on in the studio and to be able to keep broadcasting on air. Most of the people who do some work here at the station are volunteers and do not get paid for that. And there are actually some very, very nice prizes that you could potentially win if you were to subscribe this month. So this month, there is the opportunity, if you subscribe, to win a Sea Legs Brewing mixed carton, a hat, and a cozy jumper. So Sea Legs Brewing is an independent craft brewery, located under the Story Bridge in Brisbane, and it is guaranteed to have some beer flavours for everyone, for every beer lover. So if that sounds like a excellent prize you could potentially win this month, please do consider subscribing. As I said, we're all volunteers here, and I believe it costs about $80 an hour to remain on the air, and we cannot do that without support from the community. So please do consider subscribing to 4ZZZ. You can subscribe for as little as $25 for a pet or under 18-year-old, or if you're passionate, you can subscribe for $140 and you get some cool prizes with that as well. Or some cool merch with that as well, I should say, where you could get a tote bag and a shirt as well. And also, we will make wonder size for your pet if we really want to. So you could get a toad in a vest, for example, and that would be particularly cute. At the moment, I'm going to be telling you about some freshwater eels. I love freshwater eels, and sometimes I go out looking for them. And so last Tuesday, I went out to a creek at night by myself, just in the middle of the woods, which I do on a semi-regular basis, and I found an eel. And yeah, that made my entire week, to be honest. So that eel I found is the Anguilla, it has a scientific name, Anguilla reinhardti, and it is the Australian long-finned eel. In southeast Queensland, we have two different kinds of freshwater eels. We have the Australian long-finned eel, and then we have the Australian short-finned eel. So the way to distinguish the two is that the Australian long-finned eel, its dorsal fin, so the fin at the top of its body, goes about 2/3 of the way up its body, whereas the short-finned eel, it only goes about a third of the way. And the short-finned eel grows quite small, is like quite a small fish altogether, so it only reaches a maximum of about 4 feet, whereas the long-finned eel can reach up to 6 feet. So if you see any kind of eel over 4 foot long, it's probably an Australian long-finned eel. And they're super interesting as well, at least in terms of their life cycle. So if you've ever heard the phrase that we don't know where eels spawn, that's pretty true. We do kind of know for some species of freshwater eel, but for most of them, like the two that we have here in southeast Queensland, we really don't know. We know it's somewhere in the ocean, and so what happens is that eels, have that life cycle that's almost the opposite to that of salmon. So they actually are born in the ocean, and then they move up into fresh water, and then at the end of their life cycle, they move back into the ocean, and then they spawn there. But it's a bit interesting as well, because we call them freshwater eels, but technically they can live their entire lives in the ocean if they really want to. We really just don't know what's going on with them. But they certainly are the only the entire group of eels that go and live in freshwater at any stage during their life cycle. So they're actually born in the ocean, as I mentioned, and they come out these really, really, really tiny things that what sailors thought for a long time were just some weird fish that were called leptocephali, which I believe means thin heads in Latin. And that's just because they've got a really small and transparent head. But eventually they turn into a thing called a glass eel, which is what they use to navigate the ocean currents back to their the part of their life cycle that would be in freshwater. So they ride those ocean currents back to Australia, New Zealand, any other parts of the world that has freshwater eels. And then they turn into an eel elver, which is the stage they use to start climbing back up the creeks and waterfalls to get back into a suitable patch of creek for their life cycle. And they're actually really efficient climbers during this time. They can get up waterfalls. So if you ever see like an eel on a mountain, which I know there's some up on Mount Tamborine, that's how they get there. They're just really, really good at climbing when they're younger. And then they will morph into a thing called a yellow eel. And this is the part of their life cycle they spend the most amount of time as, is if they're in fresh water. It is the part of the eel life cycle you'll see when they're just chilling in a creek somewhere. And then at the end of their life cycle, I believe they're called diandromous. So yeah, go ocean, freshwater, back to the ocean, and then die in the ocean. They'll morph into a silver eel, which is when they're able to navigate those marine ecosystems a lot better compared to that of a yellow eel. So really interesting altogether for people that didn't know that. And some of these eels can actually be quite long-lived. So the New Zealand long-finned eel, which I actually have a tattoo of on my thigh, they can live for up to 120 years. And they're estimated to reach about 8 feet long, which at that point they would probably weigh between 50 and 60 kilos, which would be very frightening to see underwater, to say the least. But the largest eel that we have in the world, I believe, and is found in Australia, is called the giant mottled eel. This is an eel that is found in the more tropical regions of Australia, but can be found across like the Indo-Pacific, into parts of Africa, into Japan and northern Asia sort of area. So really interesting, because this must mean that we have different populations of this eel, because as I described earlier, these guys spawn in the ocean and then they ride ocean currents back to the locations that their parents grew up essentially when they were in freshwater. And yeah, this must mean there's several different groups of the eels, as they must all ride different ocean currents to get back to where their parents were born, essentially. Like the same ocean current that is taking you from the Pacific to Australia is a different one that takes you from Pacific to Japan or in China or something along those lines. So yeah, freshwater eels, just in general, really freaky. The New Zealand longfin eel has poisonous blood as well, which is, make of that what you will. But yeah, they're super interesting fish altogether. Please respect them because I love them and you should love them too.
You're listening to Eco Radio, the radio of the future.
You are listening to Eco Radio, the radio of the future. Thank you for that one, smaller child. And about 15 minutes ago, we actually got 2 new subscribers. So thank you very much for that. This will be the first time I get to play this little soundbite for it, I suppose. So thank you, Suan from West End.
Thank you, Princess.
Thank you very much, Princess, for that one. And then we also had Simon from Clayfield subscribe as well. So
thank you, Princess.
Thank you, Princess. Thank you very much. Up next, I am going to do a little thing that on Eco Radio we like to call the Bushcare Roundup.
It's a Bushcare Roundup. They've been pulling out weeds and then they put in trees. It's a Bushcare Roundup.
So these are your Bushcare events or anything general outdoorsy, peace or environmental related happening in southeast Queensland over the next week. On Friday the 5th from 8 till 10 a.m. there is the Archerfield Wetlands Bushcare, and that one is happening at the Archerfield Wetlands District Park in Durack. Then from 11:15 till 1:15 there is the seagrass monitoring at Currumbin Creek. That one is at Thrower Drive Public Boat Ramp in Currumbin. From 6:30 till 6:30 till 8 p.m. we have the Greater Glider Survey Walk, and that one is in Gilston. Make sure to get some tickets to that one because I know they do run out rather quickly. On Saturday the 6th from 7 till 9 a.m. there is the Crosby Road Bushcare, and that one is at 158 Crosby Road in Ascot. From 8 a.m. there is the IndigiScapes Eco Markets and Family Koala Fair, and that one is at the IndigiScapes Centre in Capalaba. On Sunday the 7th there is the Springfield Bushcare at Bridgewater Park, and that one is at 5 Vistula Circuit in Springfield. Just to go back to Saturday, I did forget one, and that one is at 9 a.m. There is the paddle party with Rising Tide that we spoke to Gabby earlier on the program about. So go to that one if you want to go for a nice little paddle up the Brisbane River, but you can also go for a walk along the circuit there as well, along the path there. There's going to be, just in general, a really fun event with that one. And then on Wednesday the 10th, from 7:30 till 9:30, there is the Success Street Bushcare, and that one is at the corner of Success Street and Beatty Road in Acacia Ridge. And then from 8 a.m. till midday, there is the Oyster Basket Recycling Working Bee, and that one is at the Port of Brisbane Park in the Port of Brisbane. With that one, essentially what you're doing is you are going to be putting oysters in a basket, as you would expect, but these are oysters that have been shucked, and they are going to go back into the ocean and start rebuilding some of those oyster beds for the ecosystem there in the Moreton Bay. So I believe with that one, 95% of that habitat, the oyster habitat, has been lost, and so shellfish, rebuilding those shellfish habitats will certainly help with the wildlife in Moreton Bay.